Ladies and gentlemen, the University of Illinois System President, Tim Killeen.
Good morning. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome all of you here on behalf of the great 84,000 students strong University of Illinois. There's always a buzz across our three great universities with the fall semester, but the news that today's distinguished guest was coming really amped it up to a roar. I'm going to ask you to help with that in a second. I am thrilled that he accepted our offer to accept an award from our Institute of Government and Public Affairs, an award that honors the integrity and high ethical standards that have guided his lifetime of public service. I'm deeply grateful that he is using the opportunity to personally share his unique insights with our student body, with students from across the University of Illinois system who are here at Follinger, more who are watching the live stream online. Welcome to you all. And let's hear momentarily from each of our universities. Will all the University of Illinois at Springfield students stand and let their presence be known? Springfield. Okay, you know what's coming. Will all of the University of Illinois at Chicago stand briefly and let their presence be known? And with all our students from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign stand up and let their presence be known. My great pleasure to one of your own, Amori Salisbury, who has the honor of introducing today's special guest. Amori is a senior here at Urbana-Champaign, a Chicago native majoring in industrial design, and his remarkable story reflects the power of a University of Illinois education. I hope you will all join me now in welcoming Amori.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amori Salisbury, design in the School of Fine, and I aspire to be one of the biggest names in the world. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, a neighborhood called Woodlawn. Growing up on the south, seen and faced enough challenge will weaken anyone, but it did the opposite for me. Those challenges gave me the motivation to do. 2 years ago, I see Nouveau, where we create that can detect early signs of babies. The road to my something big, University of Illinois. This audience knows when you come to Illinois, leave here with a degree. Another thing Illinois teaches you, really can. And when you look for examples of one person, for me, one in this room, you look to President Barack. When President Obama was first elected, I was 11 years old. I knew it was a big deal, but it wasn't until high school and college when I began to realize just how big of a deal it was. That's when I started important steps to his election, started way before anyone even knew his name. That's also when I came to understand that his road to becoming the President of the United States, his personal decision to make a difference in his community. He made a choice to use his gifts and his life to help empower others around him. Barack Obama started his career knocking on doors in Chicago. It led to a seat in the U.S. Senate And in 2009, it led to his inauguration as the 44th President of the United States of America. The exciting part for all of us sitting here right now is that it led him to the stage at University of Illinois today. When you apply to Illinois, they tell you this place is going to open up doors to big opportunities. As a student standing on this and a former U.S. president, I can tell you that that is absolutely true. Honor to introduce and welcome Barack Obama.
Hello, Illinois. ILL. 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 Okay. Checking to see if you're awake. Please have a seat, everybody. It is good to be home. It's good to see corn. Beans. I was trying to explain to somebody as we were flying in. That's corn. That's beans. They were very impressed at my agricultural knowledge. Please give it up for Amari once again. Introduction. I have a bunch of good friends here today, including I served with is one of the finest senators in the country, and we're lucky to have him. Your senator, Dick Durbin, is here. I also noticed, by the way, former Governor Edgar here, who I haven't seen in a long time, and somehow he has not aged, and I have. It is great to see you, Governor. I want to thank President Killeen and everybody at the U of I system for making it possible for me to be here today, and I am deeply honored at the Paul Douglas Award that is being, he is somebody who set the path for so much outstanding public service here in Illinois. Now, I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room. I know people are still wondering why I didn't speak at the 2017 commencement. The student, a very thoughtful invitation. Students made a spiffy video. And when I declined, I hear there was speculation that I was boycotting campus until Antonio's Pizza reopened. So I want to be clear. I did not take sides in that late-night food debate. The truth is, after 8 years in the White House, I needed to spend some time one-on-one with Michelle if I wanted to stay married. And she says hello, by the way. I also wanted to spend some quality time with my daughters, who were suddenly young women on their way out the door. And I should add, by the way, now that I have a daughter in college, I can tell all the students here, your parents suffer. They cry privately. It is brutal. So please call. Send a text. We need to hear from you, just a little something. The truth was, I was also following a wise American tradition of ex-presidents gracefully exiting the political stage and making room for new voices and new ideas. And we have our first president, George Washington, to thank for setting that example. After he led as General Washington, there were no constraints on him, really. He was practically a god to those who had followed him into battle. Constitution, there were no democratic norms that guided what he should. All powerful, he could have made him potentially president for life. And instead he resigned as commander-in-chief and moved back to his country estate. And 6 years later, he was elected president. But after 2 terms, he resigned again and rode off into the sunset. And the point Washington made, the point that is essential to American democracy, is that in a government of and by and for the there should be no permanent ruling class. There are only citizens who, through their elected and temporary representatives, determine our course and determine our character. I'm here today because this is one of those pivotal moments where one of us, as citizens of the United States, need to determine just who it is that we are, just what it is that we stand for. And as a fellow citizen, not as an ex-president, but as a fellow citizen, I'm here to deliver a simple message that you need to vote because our democracy depends on it. Now, some of you may think I'm exaggerating when I say this November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my life. And I know politicians say that all the time. I have been guilty of saying it a few times, particularly when I was on the ballot. But just a glance at recent headlines should tell you that this moment really is different. The stakes really are higher. The consequences of any of us sitting on the sidelines are more dire. And it's not as if we haven't had big elections before or choices to make in our history. The fact is, democracy has never been easy, and our founding fathers argued about everything. We waged a civil war. We overcame depression. We've lurched from progressive change to periods of retrenchment. Still, most Americans alive today, students who are here, have operated under some common assumptions about who we are and what we stand for. Out of the turmoil of the Industrial Revolution and the Great Depression, America adapted a new economy, a 20th century economy, fighting our free market with regulations to protect health and safety and fair competition, empowering workers with union movements, investing in science and infrastructure and educational institutions like strengthening our system of primary and secondary education, and stitching together a social safety net, and to unrivaled prosperity and the rise of a brass. And if you worked hard, you could climb. Is included in this process. There was a lot more work to do. And so, in response to the stain of slavery and segregation and the reality of racial, the civil rights movement not only opened new doors for African Americans, but it also opened up the floodgates of opportunity and Americans with disabilities and LGBT Americans, others to make their own claims to full and equal citizenship. And although discrimination remained a pernicious force in our society and continues to this day, and although there are controversies about how to best ensure genuine of opportunity, there's been at least rough among the overwhelming majority of Americans that our country is strongest when everybody's treated fairly. When people are judged on the merits and the content of their character, and not the color of their skin or the way in which they worship God or their last names. And that consensus then extended beyond our borders. And from the wreckage of World War II, we built a post-war web architecture system of alliances and institutions to underwrite and oppose Soviet totalitarianism. Poorer countries develop. And American leadership across the globe. We made mistakes. At times, we lost sight of our ideals. We had fierce arguments about, and we had fierce arguments. But thanks to our leadership, a bipartisan leadership, and the efforts of diplomats and Peace Corps volunteers, and most of all thanks to the constant sacrifices of our men and women in uniform, we not only reduced the prospects of war between the world's great powers, we not only won the Cold War, we helped spread a commitment to certain values and principles and human rights and the notion of the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. And even those countries that didn't abide by those principles were still subject to shame and to at least give lip service to the idea. And that provided a lever to continually improve the prospects for people around the world. That's the story of America. A story of progress. Fitful progress, incomplete progress, but progress. And that progress wasn't achieved by just a handful of famous leaders making. It was won because of countless quiet acts of heroism and dedication by citizens, by ordinary people, many of them not much older than you. It was won because, rather than standards to history, ordinary people fought and marched and mobilized and built, and yet to make history. Of course, there's always been another, darker aspect of America's story. Progress doesn't just move in a straight line. There's a reason why progress hasn't been easy, and why throughout our history, every 2 steps forward seems to sometimes produce 1 step back. Each time we painstakingly pull ourselves closer to our founding ideals, that all of us are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain rights. The ideals that say every child should have opportunity and every man and woman in this country who's willing to work hard and support a family and pursue their small piece of the American dream. Our ideals that say we have a collective responsibility to care for the sick and the infirm, and we have a responsibility to conserve the amazing bounty, the natural resources of this country and of this planet for future generations. We've gotten closer to those ideals. Somebody somewhere has pushed back. The status quo pushes back. Sometimes the backlash comes from people who are genuinely, if wrongly, fearful of change. More often it's manufactured by the powerful and the privileged, keep us divided and keep us angry and keep us sick. That helps them maintain the status quo and keep their power and keep their privilege. Coming of age during one of those moments. It did not start with Donald Trump. He, not the cause. He's just capitalizing on resentments that politicians have been fanning for years. A fear and anger that's rooted in our past out of the enormous upheavals that have taken place in your brief lifetimes. And by the way, it is brief. When I got elected. And now he's started a company. That was yesterday. But think about it. You've come of age in a smaller, more connected world where demographic shifts in the winds scrambled not only traditional economic arrangements, but our social arrangements and our religious commitment, our civic institutions. Most of you don't remember a time before 9/11 when you didn't have at an airport. Most of you don't remember a time when America wasn't at war, or when money and image could travel instantly around the globe, or when the climate wasn't changing faster than our efforts to address it. And this change has happened fast, faster than any time in human history. And it created a new economy that incredible prosperity. But it's also upended people's lives in profound ways. For those with unique skills or access to technology and capital, a global market has meant unprecedented wealth. For those not so lucky, for the factory worker or the office worker or even middle managers, those same forces may have wiped out your job, put you in no position to ask for a raise. And as wages slowed and inequality accelerated, those at the top of the economic pyramid have been able to influence government to skew things even more. Cutting taxes on the wealthiest Americans, unwinding regulations and weakening worker protections, shrinking the safety net. So, of age during a time of growing inequality, a fracturing of economic opportunity. And that growing compounded other divisions in our country: regional, racial, religious, cultural. build consensus on issues. It made politicians less willing to compromise, which increased gridlock, which made people critical about politics. And then the reckless behavior of financial elites triggered a massive financial crisis. 10 years ago this week, a crisis that resulted in the worst recession in any of our lifetimes and caused years of hardship for the American people, for many of your parents, for many of your families. Most of you weren't old enough to fully focus on what was going on at the time. But when I came into office in 2009, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. 800,000. Millions of people. Many were worried we were entering into a second Great Depression. So we worked hard to end that crisis, but also to break some of these longer-term trends. And the actions we took during that crisis returned the economy to healthy growth and initiated the longest streak of job creation on record. And we covered another 20 million Americans with health insurance, and we cut our deficits by more than half, partly by making sure that people like me, who've been given such amazing opportunities by this country, pay our fair share of taxes to help folks coming up behind them. And by the time I left office, household income was near its all-time, and the uninsured rate had hit an all-time low, and wages were rising, and poverty rates were falling. I mention all this just so when you hear how great the economy is doing right now, just remember when this recovery started. I mean, I'm glad it's continued, but when you hear about this economic miracle that's been going, when the job monthly, suddenly Republicans, it's a miracle. I had to kind of remind them, actually, those job numbers are the same as they were in 2015, in 2016, and anyway. So we made progress, but, and this is the truth, my administration couldn't reverse 40-year trends in only 8 years, especially once Republicans took over the House of Representatives in 2010 and decided to block everything we did, even things they used to support. So we pulled the economy out of crisis, but too many people who once felt solidly middle class still feel very real and very personal economic insecurity. Even though we took out bin Laden and wound down the wars in Iraq and our combat role in Afghanistan, on to halt its nuclear program, the world's still full of threats and disorder that come streaming through people's televisions every single day. And these challenges get people worried, and it frays our civic trust. And it makes a lot of people feel like the fix is in, and the game is rigged, and nobody's looking out for them, especially those communities outside our big urban centers. And even though your generation is the most diverse in history, with a greater acceptance and celebration of our differences than ever before, those are the kinds of conditions that are ripe for exploitation by politicians who have no compunction and no shame about tapping into America's dark history of racial and ethnic and religious division. Appealing to tribe, appealing to fear, pitting one group against another. People that order and security will be restored if it weren't for those who don't look like us or don't sound like us or don't pray like we do. That's an old playbook. It's as old as time. And in a healthy democracy, it doesn't work. Our antibodies kick in. And people of goodwill from across the political spectrum call out the bigots and the fear mongers. And work to compromise and get things done. And promote the better angels of our nature. But when there's a vacuum in our democracy, don't vote. When we take our basic rights and freedoms, when we turn away and stop paying attention, and stop engaging, and stop believing, the newest diversion, the electronic versions of bread and circuses, then other voices fill the void. A politics of fear and resentment and retreat, and demagogues promise simple fixes to complex problems. No promise to fight for the little guy, even as they cater to the wealthiest and most powerful. No promise to clean up corruption and then plunder away. They start undermining norms that ensure accountability and try to change the rules to entrench their power further. And they appeal to racial nationalism that's barely veiled. Sound familiar? Now, I'm not just statements versus Republicans or liberals versus conservatives. At various times in our history, this kind of politics has infected both parties. Southern Democrats were the bigger Republican president. Dixie anti-lynching legislation, opposed the idea of, although it was a Democratic president and a majority Democrat Congress, spurred on by young marchers and protesters, they got the Civil Rights Act and the finish line. Those have still got passed because of the leadership of Republicans like Illinois Everett Dirksen. He has had a monopoly on wisdom. Neither party has been exclusively responsible for us going backwards instead of forwards. But I have to, because some hear, oh, a plague on both your houses. Oh, decades. Wasn't true when Jim Edgar was a governor here in Illinois. Thompson was governor. Got a lot of good Republican, but over the past few decades of division and resentment and paranoia has a home in the Republican Party. This Congress has changed the finding of campaign finance, billionaires' outside influence over our politics, systematically attacked voter for young people and minorities and the poor to vote, handed out tax cuts without regard to debt, slashed the safety net wherever, cast dozens of votes to take away health insurance from ordinary Americans, embraced conspiracy theories like Gazi, for my birth certificate, rejected science, rejected facts, climate change, embraced absolutism, a willingness to default on America's debt by not paying our bill, to a refusal to even meet a nominee for the speech happened to be nominated by a Democratic. None of this is conservative. I don't mean to. I'm channeling now, but that's not what I think, when he helped form the Republican Party. It's not conservative. It sure isn't normal. It's radical. It's a vision that says the power and those is all that matters, even when it hurts the country. The few who can afford high-priced lobbyists and unlimited campaign contributions set the. And over the past 2 years is now nearing its logical conclusion. Republicans in control of Congress and the White House, any checks or balances, they've provided another $1 million in tax cuts to people who I promised it and don't even pretend as supposedly a fiscal concern. Deficits do not matter. So just 2 years ago, when the deficit was lower, they said, I couldn't afford to help working families or seniors on Medicare because the deficit was an excess. What changed? Corporate dollars. Allowing dishonest lenders to take advantage of veterans and students and consumers again. They'd be only on earth pull out of an agreement. It's not North Korea, it's not Russia or Saudi Arabia. It's us, the only country. There are a lot of countries. We're the only ones. They're undermining our alliances, closing up to Russia. What is the Republican Party? Its central organizing principle was the fight against, and now they're cozying up to the fight. Actively blocking what would defend our elections from Russian attack. Of the Affordable Care, more than 3 million Americans. They're still in power next fall. You've had it again. They've said so. In a healthy democracy, there's some checks and balances on this kind of behavior, this kind of inconsistency. But right now, there's nothing. Republicans Republicans who know better in Congress, and they're there, quoted, saying, kind of crazy, are backwards to shield this day or accountability or consequence. Seem utterly unwilling and the backbone to safeguards that make our democracy work. And by the way, that everything, well, there are people inside the White House who's following the president's orders. That is not serious here. That's not how our democracy is supposed to work. These people they're not accountable. They're not doing us a service by actively 90% of the crazy stuff that's coming out of this White House and then saying, don't worry, we're preventing the other 10%. That's not how things are supposed to work. This is not normal. So these are extraordinary times, dangerous times. But here's the good news. In 2 months, we have the chance, not the certainty, to restore some semblance of sanity to our politics. Because there is actually only one real check on bad policy and abuses of power, and that's you. Look, Americans will always have disagreements on policy. This is a big country. It is a raucous country. People have different points of view. I happen to be a Democrat. I support Democratic candidates. I believe our policies are better and that we have a bigger, bolder vision of opportunity and equality and justice and inclusive democracy. We know there are a lot of jobs getting a chance to occupy or aren't getting paid enough or aren't getting benefits like insurance. It's harder for a rainy day, let alone retirement. So Democrats aren't just running on good old ideas like a higher minimum wage. They're running on good new ideas like Medicare for all, giving workers seats on corporate boards, reversing the most egregious corporate tax cuts to make sure college students graduate debt-free. We know that people are tired of toxic corruption. Democracy depends on transparency and accountability, so Democrats aren't just running on good old ideas like requiring presidential candidates to release their tax returns and from making campaign contributions, but on good new ideas, like barring lobbyists from getting paid by foreign governments. We know that climate change isn't just coming, it is here. So Democrats aren't just running on good old ideas like increasing gas mileage, which I did and which Republicans are trying to reverse, but on good new ideas like putting a price on carbon pollution. We know that in a smaller, more connected world, we can't just put technology back in a box. We can't just put walls up all around America. Don't keep out threats like terrorism or disease. And that's why we leading our alliances and helping other countries develop and pushing back against tyrants. And Democrats talk about our immigration system. So, yes, it is orderly and it is fair and it is legal, but it continues to welcome strivers and dreamers from all around the world. That's why I'm a Democrat. That's a set of ideas that I believe in. But I am here that even if you don't agree with me or Democrats on policy. Even if you believe in more libertarian economic, even if you are an evangelical and our position on certain social issues is a bridge too far. Even if your assessment of immigration is mistaken and the Democrats aren't serious enough about immigration enforcement, that you should still be concerned with our current course and should still want to see a restoration of honesty and decency and lawfulness in our government. It should not be Democrat. It should not be a partisan to say that we do not pressure the Attorney General or the FBI to use the criminal justice system as a cudgel to punish our politics. Or to explicitly call on the Attorney General of our own party from prosecution because an election happens to be coming up. I'm not making that up. That's not hypothetical. It shouldn't be Democratic or Republican to say that we don't threaten the freedom of the press because they say things or publish stories we don't like. I complained plenty about Fox News. But you never heard me threaten to shut them down or call them enemies of the people. It shouldn't be Democratic or Republican to say we don't target certain groups of people based on what they look like or how they pray. We are supposed to stand up to bullies, not follow them. We're supposed to stand up to discrimination. As heck supposed to stand up clearly to Nazi sympathizers. How hard can that be? Saying that Nazis are bad. I'll be honest. Sometimes I get into arguments with progressive friends about what the current political movement requires. There are well-meaning folks passionate about social justice who think things have gotten so bad, the lines have been so starkly drawn, that we have to fight fire with fire. We have to do the same things to the Republicans, adopt their, say whatever works, make up stuff about the other side. I don't agree with that. It's not because I'm soft. It's not because I'm interested in promoting an empty body. I don't agree with it because eroding our civic institutions and our civic and making people angrier and yelling at each other and making people sin always works better for those who don't believe in the power of collective action. You don't need an effective government or a robust press or reasoned debate when all you're concerned about is maintaining power. In fact, the more cynical people are about government, the angrier they are about the prospects for change,